"I'm pregnant," Mia whispered, her voice trembling as she stared at the 4 positive pregnancy tests lined up on the bathroom counter. Impossible. The doctors had been unanimous, she would never conceive. Her husband of 8 years, billionaire real estate mogul James Westfield, had divorced her just 3 months ago, citing her defective womb as grounds for their separation. Now, standing in the modest apartment she'd been forced to rent after losing everything, Mia felt her world tilt on its axis. Whose child was she carrying? And how would she tell David, the kind-hearted single father of 4 who had been quietly healing her broken heart, a man who believed she could never have children of her own? The divorce papers had been cruel in their precision. Irreconcilable differences due to respondents' inability to produce an heir. James had made it clear during their final argument, "What good is a wife who can't give me children? I need a legacy, Mia, not a barren companion." He'd already replaced her with his 24-year-old assistant before the ink on their divorce papers had dried. Mia had lost her home, her status, and the man she thought would love her forever. But most devastating was facing the truth she'd been running from, that she would never know the joy of motherhood. Until now. David Matthews had entered her life like a whirlwind 6 weeks ago when she'd taken a job at the local library. He'd been struggling with an armful of children's books, a toddler on his hip, and 3 other children orbiting around him like planets around a sun. Their eyes had met over the checkout counter, and something had sparked between them, something neither expected. David, a construction foreman who'd lost his wife to cancer 2 years prior, hadn't been looking for love. And Mia, still raw from rejection, certainly hadn't been ready to trust again. Yet here they were, cautiously building something beautiful amid the chaos of his busy household. The pregnancy test revelation sent Mia spiraling. Medical miracles happened, yes, but the timing was suspicious. Had James's doctors been wrong? Or worse, had James lied about his own fertility issues, blaming her all those years? She needed answers before she could tell David, who had already confessed he was falling in love with her despite her warnings that she could never add to his brood. With trembling hands, she made an appointment with a new specialist, determined to understand what was happening to her body before she upended David's life, and the lives of his 4 children who were just beginning to accept her. Dr. Sharma's office was nothing like the sterile, luxury medical suites James had taken her to. The community clinic was warm, with children's drawings taped to the walls and a kind-faced doctor who took her time reviewing Mia's extensive medical history. "Mrs. Westfield." "It's Ms. Chen now," Mia corrected, reclaiming her maiden name along with her identity. "Ms. Chen, I've reviewed your previous diagnoses. I'd like to run my own tests before discussing the pregnancy, if that's all right with you." Something in the doctor's tone made Mia's heart race. Was there more to this story than she realized? 3 days later, Mia sat across from David at his kitchen table after his children had gone to bed. The house was quiet except for the occasional creak of the old farmhouse settling. David reached across the table and took her hands in his calloused ones. "You've been distant, Mia. Whatever it is, we can face it together." His eyes, kind and steady, nearly broke her. How could she tell this man, who had chosen her precisely because she wouldn't complicate his life with more children, that she was inexplicably pregnant? And how could she explain her growing suspicion that James had deliberately misled her about her fertility? "David, the words caught in her throat as his youngest daughter, 4-year-old Lily, appeared in the doorway clutching her stuffed rabbit. "I had a bad dream," the little girl mumbled, rubbing her eyes. "Can Mia tuck me in again?" David smiled apologetically as Mia rose. "We'll talk later," she promised, following Lily back to her bedroom. As she smoothed the blankets around the child's small form, Mia felt a surge of love so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. These children had claimed pieces of her heart so effortlessly. What would happen when they learned she was carrying a child of her own? Would they feel betrayed? Would David? The next morning, Mia's phone rang as she was preparing for work. Dar. Sharma's voice was grave. Ms. Chen, I need you to come in immediately. I've found something in your test results that requires urgent discussion. The call ended before Mia could ask questions, leaving her shaking with fear. Was something wrong with the baby? Or was there something more sinister at play? The clinic waiting room was empty when Mia arrived. Dr. Sharma ushered her directly into her office, closing the door firmly behind them. Ms. Chen, what I'm about to tell you is deeply troubling from a medical ethics standpoint. She placed a folder on the desk between them. You were never infertile. Mia stared at her, uncomprehending. What? The medication you were prescribed by Dr. Winters, James's family physician, was actually preventing conception. It was marketed to you as a fertility treatment, but it was doing the opposite. Dr. Sharma's eyes were compassionate but fierce. Someone deliberately kept you from getting pregnant for 8 years, Ms. Chen. The room seemed to tilt as the implications crashed over Mia. James had wanted children, he'd left her because she couldn't have them. Unless he'd never wanted children with her. Unless the fertility treatments, the specialists, the tears and recriminations had all been an elaborate setup to eventually discard her with public sympathy on his side. But why? What could possibly justify such cruelty? As if reading her thoughts, Dr. Sharma slid another document across the desk. I took the liberty of looking into your prenuptial agreement. Section 7.3 states that in the event of divorce due to your inability to bear children, you forfeit all claims to the Westfield family holdings. She paused, letting the words sink in. Ms. Chen, I believe your ex-husband orchestrated your supposed infertility to avoid sharing his wealth with you when he decided to end your marriage. Mia felt as though she'd been struck. The prenup had been hundreds of pages long, presented to her days before their lavish wedding. James had assured her it was standard protection for someone of his wealth. She'd signed without questioning, young and in love, trusting the man who'd promised to cherish her forever. He stole 8 years of my life, she whispered. 8 years I could have been a mother. The good news, Dr. Sharma continued gently, is that you're perfectly healthy, and so is your baby. You conceived naturally once you stopped taking the medication after your divorce. A cold realization washed over Mia. The baby, it's not James's, is it? Dr. Sharma shook her head. Based on the dates you provided, conception occurred approximately 7 weeks ago. 7 weeks. Right when she'd met David. The night of their first date, when they'd shared a bottle of wine and talked until dawn, when one kiss had led to another and they'd both been carried away by a connection neither had expected to find again. Mia left the clinic in a daze, her mind racing with implications. She had a choice to make. She could pursue legal action against James for his unconscionable deception, or she could focus on the future. A future that now included a child she'd never thought possible and a man who had chosen her despite believing she could never give him more children. That evening, she drove to David's house with her heart in her throat. His children greeted her with their usual enthusiasm, 10-year-old twins Jack and Emma arguing over whose turn it was to show Mia their latest school projects, 7-year-old Ben shyly offering her a drawing, and little Lily wrapping herself around Mia's legs like a koala. David watched from the doorway, his eyes crinkling with affection. How would that expression change when she told him the truth? After dinner and bedtime stories, when the house had quieted, David poured them each a glass of water and sat beside her on the porch swing. You've been carrying something heavy, Mia. Whatever it is, I'm here. The words tumbled out, the pregnancy, the doctor's revelation, James's betrayal. David listened without interrupting, his expression shifting from shock to outrage to something softer as she finished. So you see, Mia concluded, her voice barely audible, I'm pregnant with your child. A child I never thought I could have. I understand if this changes things between us. You already have 4 children, and we've only known each other for such a short time. David was silent for so long that Mia's heart began to sink. Then, to her astonishment, he knelt before her and took her hands in his. "Mia Chen, when my wife died, I thought I'd never find love again. Then you walked into the library and into our lives, and suddenly there was color where there had been only gray." His voice broke. "You think having a baby would make me want you less? Mia, it's a miracle, one I get to share with the woman I've fallen in love with. But your children will be over the moon to have a little brother or sister." He smiled, brushing away the tears that had begun to fall down her cheeks. "They already love you, Mia. We all do." As David pulled her into his arms, Mia felt something shift inside her, a healing of wounds she'd thought would never close. But even as she melted into his embrace, a shadow crossed her mind. James wouldn't simply disappear from her life. When he discovered the truth about what he'd done, there would be consequences. And a man like James Westfield, with his power and resources, would not accept defeat gracefully. 3 months later, Mia's small baby bump was just becoming visible as she helped Emma with her science project at the kitchen table. David had gone to pick up pizza for dinner, and the younger children were playing in the backyard of what was now their shared home. The doorbell rang, and Mia, expecting it to be the package of baby books she'd ordered, opened it without checking. James Westfield stood on the porch, immaculate in a tailored suit, his cold eyes taking in her pregnant form with calculated interest. "Well, well," he said, his voice as smooth and venomous as she remembered. "It seems congratulations are in order." Mia instinctively placed a protective hand over her belly. "What are you doing here, James? I received some interesting paperwork from your lawyer." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Quite serious allegations, Mia. Fraud, medical malpractice, emotional distress. Very creative. They're not allegations. They're facts, and you know it." Mia's voice was steadier than she felt. "Dr. Winters has already agreed to cooperate with the investigation in exchange for leniency." Something flickered across James's face, the first hint of uncertainty she'd ever seen in him. "You always were smarter than I gave you credit for. But you're forgetting something crucial." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I made you, Mia. I can break you just as easily. Do you really want to drag your new family into a public scandal?" Before Mia could respond, a small voice came from behind her. "Who are you?" Emma stood in the hallway, her curious eyes moving between Mia and the stranger at the door. James's expression shifted, a predatory smile forming. "I'm an old friend of Mia's, sweetheart." "And who might you be?" "That's enough." Mia moved to block his view of Emma. "You need to leave, James. Now." "We're not finished discussing this," he hissed, but retreated a step. "I'll be in touch." As his sleek car pulled away, Mia felt her knees weaken. The threat was clear: back down, or he would make sure her new happiness came crashing down around her. She had evidence of his deception, yes, but James had connections everywhere: judges, media, law enforcement. Going up against him meant risking everything she'd found with David and his children. That night, after the children were asleep, Mia told David about James's visit. "He's trying to intimidate me into dropping the lawsuit," she explained, curled against David's side on the couch. "And the worst part is, it's working. I'm terrified of what he might do." David was quiet for a moment, his arm tightening around her. "What do you want to do, Mia? Not what you think is right, or what you think I want. What do you want?" The question caught her off guard. During her years with James, her wants had always been secondary, eventually becoming so buried she'd stopped recognizing them altogether. "I want." She began slowly, "I want him to face consequences for what he did. Not just to me, but to prevent him from doing it to someone else." She placed a hand on her growing belly. "And I want our child to know that their mother stood up for herself." David nodded, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Then we fight. Together." The legal battle that followed was brutal. James used every resource at his disposal to discredit Mia, painting her as a gold digger who'd fabricated medical evidence after failing to secure a larger divorce settlement. The stress took its toll on her pregnancy, leading to concerns about premature labor. David remained steadfast, rearranging his work schedule to attend every doctor's appointment, every legal meeting, creating a shield between Mia and the worst of the storm. 6 months into the pregnancy, with the lawsuit moving slowly through the courts, Mia received an unexpected visitor at the library where she still worked part-time. Eliza Westfield, James's mother and the family matriarch, stood before her desk, elegant and imposing in her designer suit. "Mrs. Westfield," Mia said cautiously, aware of curious eyes watching them. "This is a surprise." "I imagine it is." The older woman's voice was clipped. "Is there somewhere we can speak privately?" In the small staff room, Eliza declined the offered chair, preferring to stand. "I'll be direct, Mia. I've come to offer you a settlement. $20 million to drop all charges against my son and sign a non-disclosure agreement." Mia blinked, stunned by the figure. It was far more than she would likely receive even if she won the lawsuit. Why now? James seemed determined to fight this to the end. Something shifted in Eliza's expression, a flicker of what might have been shame. "Because I've seen the evidence your lawyers presented. The prescription records. Dr. Winter's testimony." She paused. "And because you're not the first." "What?" "There was another woman before you. James's college girlfriend. She also had fertility issues that mysteriously resolved after they broke up." Eliza's perfectly manicured hands tightened on her purse. "I dismissed it as coincidence then. I can't do that anymore." Mia felt a chill run through her. "You knew." "I suspected," Eliza corrected sharply. "There's a difference." She straightened her shoulders. "The offer stands. $20 million, and this all goes away quietly." That evening, Mia and David sat at their kitchen table, the children already asleep upstairs, discussing Eliza's offer. "It's life-changing money," David acknowledged. "It would pay for college for all 5 kids, with plenty left over." "But it means James never faces real consequences," Mia countered. "He just writes a check and moves on to his next victim." David took her hand. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you. But Mia, think about what matters most. Is it seeing James punished, or is it building our future?" The question lingered in Mia's mind as she lay awake that night, feeling their baby kick inside her. What did justice look like in this situation? Was it a public reckoning that might drag on for years, or was it taking back her power and using James's money to create the family he tried to deny her? The next morning, Mia called her lawyer with her decision. 3 days later, she sat across from James and his mother in a conference room, the settlement papers between them. James wouldn't meet her eyes, his jaw tight with suppressed rage. "Before I sign," Mia said clearly, "I want you to know something, James. You didn't break me. You tried to take everything from me, my dignity, my dreams of motherhood, my self-worth. But in losing you, I found myself again." She placed a protective hand over her belly. "And I found a man who chose me knowing I might never give him children, the opposite of you, who rejected me because you thought I couldn't." James's face flushed with anger, but Eliza placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Sign the papers, Mia," the older woman said quietly. "And know that while this settlement has a non-disclosure clause about the medical deception, it does not prevent you from speaking about the nature of your marriage or divorce." That distinction was important to me. Understanding dawned on Mia. Eliza was giving her permission to tell her story, just not the specific medical details. It was a small victory, but a meaningful one. Mia signed the papers, her signature steady despite the emotions churning inside her. As she stood to leave, Eliza caught her eye with a look that communicated volumes: regret, respect, and perhaps a hint of admiration. James remained seated, his posture rigid with defeat. "Goodbye, James," Mia said simply, and walked out of the conference room without looking back. The settlement money arrived in her account 3 days later. Mia and David decided to place most of it in trusts for the children, including their unborn baby. They used a portion to buy a larger home on the outskirts of town, a rambling farmhouse with enough bedrooms for their growing family and a sprawling yard where the children could play. It wasn't the luxury penthouse Mia had shared with James, but it was filled with something her previous home had lacked: genuine love. As her pregnancy progressed, Mia found herself healing in ways she hadn't expected. The children's excitement about their new sibling was contagious. 10-year-old Jack appointed himself official protector, constantly asking if she needed anything. His twin sister Emma became fascinated with the science of pregnancy, reading every book she could find on fetal development. 7-year-old Ben was quieter in his interest, but Mia often caught him talking softly to her belly when he thought no one was listening. And little Lily, at 4, was simply delighted by the idea of no longer being the youngest. "Will the baby love me?" Lily asked one evening as Mia tucked her into bed. "Of course," Mia assured her, smoothing back the little girl's curls. "The baby will adore you. You'll be the big sister." Lily considered this seriously. "I never been a big sister before." "You'll be wonderful at it," Mia promised, her heart swelling with love for this child who wasn't biologically hers but had become hers in every way that mattered. David, watching from the doorway, caught her eye with a smile that still made her pulse quicken. Later, as they prepared for bed themselves, he wrapped his arms around her from behind, his hands cradling her growing belly. "I never thought I'd have this again," he murmured against her hair. "After Sarah died, I was just existing. Taking care of the kids, going through the motions. You brought me back to life, Mia." She turned in his arms, reaching up to touch his face. "We brought each other back," she corrected softly. "From different kinds of deaths, maybe, but still." Their wedding was a simple affair in the backyard of their new home, with the children as their only attendants. Mia, 7 months pregnant and radiant in a flowing cream dress, exchanged vows with David under an arch of wildflowers. The twins held hands and tried to look solemn despite their excitement. Ben carried the rings with careful concentration. Lily scattered rose petals with enthusiastic abandon, covering not just the aisle but most of the assembled guests as well. As David slipped the ring onto her finger, Mia felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This wasn't the fairy tale she'd imagined as a young woman, marrying a billionaire, living in luxury, being the envy of her social circle. It was something far more precious, a family built on choice rather than obligation, on acceptance rather than conditions. The pregnancy had been progressing normally until the 8th month, when Mia woke in the middle of the night with sharp pains radiating across her abdomen. David rushed her to the hospital while their elderly neighbor stayed with the sleeping children. The diagnosis was preeclampsia, dangerously high blood pressure that threatened both Mia and the baby. "We need to deliver now," the doctor explained, her expression grave. "The baby is showing signs of distress, and your blood pressure isn't responding to medication." Fear gripped Mia as she was wheeled into the operating room for an emergency C-section. This child, this miracle she'd never thought possible, might be taken from her before they'd even had a chance to meet. David, gowned and masked, held her hand throughout the procedure, his eyes above the surgical mask reflecting her own terror. "Stay with me," he whispered. "Both of you. Please." The surgery was a blur of sensations, pressure, voices, the metallic smell of blood. Then, cutting through it all, a thin, angry cry that made Mia's heart leap. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, lifting a tiny, red-faced infant into view. "Small, but she's a fighter." They named her Hope. A testament to what had brought them together and carried them through. At 5 pounds, 3 ounces, she was immediately whisked to the NICU, where she would spend her first 2 weeks of life. Mia, recovering from surgery and still battling high blood pressure, could only visit for short periods. David divided his time between the hospital, the children at home, and his job, exhaustion etching new lines around his eyes. The older children met their baby sister through the NICU window, their faces pressed against the glass as they stared in wonder at the tiny being who had joined their family. "She's so small," Jack whispered, uncharacteristically subdued. "But strong," Emma added confidently. "The nurse said she's doing really well." Ben simply watched, his solemn eyes taking in every detail of his new sister. Lily, unable to see properly, demanded to be lifted up. "She looks like Mia," the little girl declared once David hoisted her to window level. "Does she?" David asked, surprised. He'd been thinking the baby resembled his late wife Sarah around the eyes, but hadn't mentioned it. Lily nodded decisively. "She's pretty like Mia. And brave." The day they brought Hope home was a celebration. The children had decorated the house with welcome signs and paper chains. David carried the car seat with exaggerated care, as if transporting nitroglycerin rather than a newborn. Mia, still moving gingerly from her C-section, felt tears spring to her eyes at the sight of all 6 of them together in their home for the first time. That night, after the excitement had settled and the older children were asleep, Mia sat in the nursery rocking Hope. David found them there, the baby asleep on Mia's chest, Mia herself dozing in the rocking chair. He stood watching them, overwhelmed by love and gratitude, until Mia's eyes fluttered open. "Hey," she whispered, smiling sleepily. "Hey yourself." He knelt beside the chair, gently touching Hope's downy head. "I was just thinking about how different things might have been. If James hadn't lied? If I'd had his children instead?" David nodded. "Or if Sarah hadn't gotten sick? If we'd never met?" Mia considered this, looking down at the perfect, peaceful face of their daughter. "I used to think everything happens for a reason. Then when James left me, I stopped believing that. It seemed too cruel. What possible reason could there be for such deliberate deception?" She stroked Hope's back, feeling the steady rise and fall of her breathing. "But now I wonder if maybe there is a pattern we can't see. Not fate, exactly, but connections. Possibilities. Like how losing Sarah led me to you. How James's cruelty freed you to find us. Something like that." She reached for his hand. "I wouldn't wish what happened to either of us on anyone. But I can't regret where it led." The first year of Hope's life passed in a blur of milestones and adjustments. The older children adapted to their new sister with varying degrees of enthusiasm and occasional jealousy. David's construction business thrived as he took on larger projects, allowing Mia to stay home with Hope while continuing her part-time work at the library. Their life settled into a chaotic but joyful rhythm. Then, 2 weeks after Hope's first birthday, a letter arrived addressed to Mia in an elegant, familiar hand. Eliza Westfield's personal stationery. Mia opened it with trembling fingers while Hope napped and the other children were at school. Inside was a newspaper clipping and a brief note. "Mia, asterisk. I thought you should hear this from someone who understands the context rather than through gossip or social media. James is engaged to be married again. Her name is Vanessa Carrington, daughter of Senator Carrington. The wedding is set for June, asterisk. I've spoken with her privately. She knows nothing of what happened between you and James, only that his first wife was unable to have children. I debated whether to tell her the truth and risk being accused of interfering, or remain silent and risk another woman suffering as you did, asterisk. In the end, I chose a middle path. I've arranged for her to have an independent medical examination with a doctor of my choosing before the wedding. What she does with that information will be her choice, asterisk. I hope you and your family are well, asterisk. Eliza Westfield, asterisk. The newspaper clipping showed James and a stunning blonde woman at a charity gala, his arm possessively around her waist, her left hand prominently displaying an enormous diamond ring. They looked perfect together, wealthy, beautiful, poised for a life of privilege. Mia sat for a long time with the letter in her lap, unexpected emotions washing over her. Not jealousy, she had no desire to be in Vanessa Carrington's place. Not anger, her rage at James had cooled to something more like pity. What she felt was a complex mixture of concern for this unknown woman and gratitude for her own escape. When David came home that evening, she showed him the letter. He read it carefully, his expression thoughtful. "What are you thinking?" he asked when he finished. "I'm thinking about contacting her," Mia admitted. "Vanessa. Not to warn her off or tell her what James did to me, but just to let her know she can reach out if she ever needs to talk." David considered this. "That's generous of you. But are you sure it's wise? James would see it as interference." "I know. And maybe it is." Mia sighed, leaning against him. "But I keep thinking about how alone I felt when everything fell apart. How I had no one who understood what I was going through." In the end, Mia decided against direct contact. Instead, she wrote a letter to Eliza, thanking her for the information and including her private email address with permission to share it with Vanessa should the need ever arise. It was the most she could do without overstepping boundaries that weren't hers to cross. Life continued its forward momentum. Hope took her first steps, chasing after her older siblings with determined wobbles. Jack and Emma entered middle school, navigating the social complexities of pre-adolescence. Ben developed an intense interest in astronomy, covering his bedroom ceiling with glow-in-the-dark stars. Lily started kindergarten, returning home each day bursting with new knowledge to share. David's construction company secured a contract to build a new community center, a project that would keep him busy for the next year but would also establish his reputation as one of the premier builders in the region. Mia, finding herself with more time as Hope became more independent, began writing a children's book series inspired by their blended family's experiences. It was a good life. Not perfect, with the usual challenges of raising 5 children and maintaining a marriage amid the chaos, but rich with love and purpose. The settlement money from James remained largely untouched in the children's trusts, a safety net rather than a lifestyle. Then, 18 months after Eliza's letter, Mia received an email from an unfamiliar address. "Dear Mia, **. You don't know me, but I'm Vanessa Westfield, formerly Carrington. Eliza gave me your email address. I hope you don't mind me reaching out, **. James and I have been married for 8 months. 3 months ago, I discovered I was pregnant. James was less enthusiastic than I expected. Last week, I found a bottle of pills in his bathroom cabinet. They weren't labeled, but I had them analyzed by a pharmacist friend. They're the same medication Eliza warned me about before our wedding, the one that prevents conception while being marketed as a fertility aid, **. I confronted James. He denied everything, of course. Said they were left over from his marriage to you, that he'd forgotten they were there. But I know he's lying. I've seen how he looks at me now that I'm showing, like I've betrayed him somehow by actually becoming pregnant, **. I'm leaving him. My father is helping me secure a divorce attorney. I needed to talk to someone who would understand. Eliza suggested you might, **. I'm sorry to burden you with this. If you'd rather not respond, I completely understand, **. Vanessa **. Mia stared at the screen, a storm of emotions churning inside her. Anger at James for attempting the same deception again. Relief that Vanessa had discovered the truth before suffering years of manipulation. And a strange sense of validation, proof that what had happened to her wasn't her fault, wasn't her failure. She showed the email to David that night after the children were asleep. He read it with a deepening frown. "That son of a bitch," he muttered. "He actually tried it again. But she caught him, Mia pointed out. Because Eliza warned her. Because we didn't stay silent. She took a deep breath. I'm going to respond. Offer whatever support I can. David nodded, pulling her close. Of course you are. It's who you are, you help people heal. You helped me, you helped the kids. Now you'll help her. The correspondence between Mia and Vanessa developed into an unexpected friendship. Despite their very different backgrounds, Vanessa came from political royalty, groomed for public life since childhood. They found common ground in their experiences with James and their journeys toward reclaiming their identities after his influence. Vanessa's divorce was finalized 4 months later, shortly before she gave birth to a daughter she named Eleanor. James, facing potential scandal if the truth about his medical deception became public, agreed to a generous settlement and limited visitation rights. Eliza, making her allegiances clear, attended Eleanor's birth rather than supporting her son through the divorce proceedings. 6 months after Eleanor's birth, Vanessa visited Mia and David's home, bringing her daughter to meet the family that had become her lifeline during the darkest period of her life. The contrast between the polished, patrician Vanessa and the chaotic warmth of the Matthewschen household might have been comical if not for the genuine connection between the two women. "Your home is wonderful," Vanessa said as they sat on the back porch watching the children play. Eleanor and Hope, only months apart in age, were being gently supervised by Lily, who took her role as older sister to both babies very seriously. "It's so full of life. And noise," Mia laughed. "And mess. And love." Vanessa's expression turned wistful. "That's what I want for Ellie. A childhood filled with love, not appearances and expectations." She hesitated. "My parents are supportive, but they don't really understand why I'm not interested in dating again. They keep introducing me to suitable men, other politicians' sons, mostly. And you're not ready?" "It's not even that. It's..." Vanessa struggled to articulate her thoughts. "James made me doubt my judgment. Made me question whether I can trust what someone shows me about themselves." Mia nodded in understanding. "I felt the same way after my divorce. If I could be so completely wrong about someone I lived with for 8 years, how could I ever trust my instincts again?" She glanced toward David, who was helping Ben adjust the telescope they'd set up for stargazing later. "But the heart is resilient. And sometimes the right person comes along when you least expect it. Like David did for you." "Like David did for me," Mia agreed. "Not perfect, thank goodness. Just real. Honest. Kind." That evening, after Vanessa and Eleanor had left with promises to visit again soon, Mia found herself reflecting on the strange, circuitous path that had led her to this moment. If James hadn't deceived her, if he hadn't discarded her when she failed to fulfill his expectations, she would never have found David and his children. Never have experienced the joy of raising 5 unique, wonderful young people. Never have known the profound love that came from being chosen rather than acquired. As if sensing her thoughts, David joined her on the porch swing, handing her a glass of wine. "Penny for your thoughts?" "I was just thinking about how life surprises you," she said, leaning against his shoulder. "How sometimes the worst thing that happens to you leads to the best thing." He nodded, his arms settling around her shoulders. "I think about that too. After Sarah died, I was so angry at the universe. It seemed so pointless, so cruel. But if she hadn't gotten sick, if I hadn't become a single dad struggling to hold it all together, I might never have met you. Do you think Sarah would approve? Of us, I mean?" It was a question she'd never asked before, though she'd wondered many times. David was quiet for a moment, considering.